So, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Money Tree Fundraising's live chat with me, Beth Upton. I am the CEO of Money Tree Fundraising. We're here to talk all things major donor fundraising, and welcome to all of you. It's a completely free flow session. So, what I suggest is if you've got a question, you can either raise your hand and I'll come to you and you can ask me live, or if you don't want to do that, which is perfectly fine, if you just pop your question in the chat and I will read it out and then we will hear my answer together. Before we get started, I just want to take the temperature of the room, and could you pop in the chat how confident you are with your major donor fundraising right now? Just a 1 to 10. 10 is totally nailing it. 1 is haven't even started or winging it. I just really like to get a sense of where you guys all are in the major donor spectrum. And while you're popping that in the chat, um, always in the middle, Jackie, it's good to be exactly on the fence. While you're doing that, I just want to say, if you want to know for sure where you are in your major donor program, one of the things you can do is take our major donor scorecard, which is completely free. I'm going to put a link in the chat now. And what that would do is you answer 20 questions, yes, no, maybe. Takes 2 to 5 minutes, depending how easy it is for you to answer the questions. And that will give you a really detailed report on where you actually are in your major donor fundraising. Good reason to take that this week as opposed to waiting and doing it another day is that I have been compiling the results of our major donor scorecard over the last 2 years, and I'm about to launch a report in the next 2 weeks looking at the actual state of major donor fundraising in the UK. Where is everybody and how are they doing? Your data today wouldn't be in the report, but as a scorecard completer, you would be amongst the first to receive the report once it's published. So if you take the scorecard today, you can get yourself on that list. And it's interesting, most of you guys are at the lower end, so mainly 4s. Phil, I love that you're a 9, and hopefully you can step in and answer some of the questions when they come along. But really good to know where everyone is. So hello and welcome this afternoon. Just one extra time for new people. If you have your camera on, there is a chance that you will be on YouTube. So if you don't want to be on YouTube, please do pop your camera off. And any questions you want to ask me, because that's what the purpose of this next hour together is about, is please either unmute yourself and come and ask me. I'm very happy to do that. Or otherwise just pop your question in the chat and we will go from there. For those of you who've just arrived, we were just warming up by asking everyone to kind of score 1 to 10 where you think you are, or how you feel your major donor program is. 10 is absolutely nailing it, and we've got Phil there with a really confident 9, which I love to see. Down to 1 which would be you haven't even started or you're really winging it. And there's most people there I can see are sort of mid. Imogen, you're a 7 at Lice. 5, building a new program, only your 3rd month. I think that's really positive, Victoria, that you're building a new program. I love to see that. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to step in and ask them. Otherwise, I have had a couple of questions come to me before we started from people who couldn't join us today. So I'm going to start with one of those, which is, what is the right first ask for a potential major donor, and how do you get to that number? Which is a really good question. So there's no easy answer to that, really. You will have some people on your list who are well-known philanthropists, let's put it that way, who have really public profile, who are giving to different charities, who are having their names up on the boards of arts organizations, and you can do that desk research to work out where their giving is, right? And that is one route. And if you can find that out, brilliant, do that. And you can sort of picture ask, you know that they gave £100,000 to this charity, you know that they give £10,000 a year to that charity, and you can do that. But otherwise, their giving is secret. You have no idea where you're going to pitch it. Either they're not a donor at all, or perhaps they're giving in a regular giving way. Perhaps they're giving £5, £10 a month, and you happened to discover that they were a wealthy individual and you've been cultivating them on one thing and another. So one of the things I would say in answer to this question is, during those conversations that you are having with them in that cultivation phase, you should be very curious. And that curiosity should extend to the types of charities they give to and how they like to give. Now, that isn't necessarily the first conversation you have with someone you don't have a relationship with, but during those conversations where you're saying to them, I'd really like to learn more about this, or I'd like to pick your brains about that, and can I seek your advice there? And one of the most common ways I have ever approached new major donors is by having a new case for support. Perhaps there's a new program area, perhaps you're framing it differently, and taking it to someone and say, I'd really like your advice as a person in local business, as a renowned philanthropist, as someone who's got a family trust, whatever it is, right? I have a strategy to approach more people like you, and would really like your advice and expertise from a place of knowledge as to how this lands, how this is going to work for you. And so that's how you do it. So you come from a place of advice, and so you go, oh, I'm really interested. So when you support other charities, how does that work? And what's your sort of in time, you literally say, and what kind of levels do you support those charities at? And you could, if the conversation is going that way, say, I'd really like to put a proposal to you. What level would you consider giving at? You could leave it vague like that. They will always lowball you, but that could be a good first way in if you don't feel anything else. The other way is you put the proposal to them and you have 3 levels. That's an option. So maybe you put in a 5 grand ask, a 20 grand ask, and a 50 grand ask. I don't know. It depends on the person, what you think. Or you peg somewhere that you think would be potentially flatteringly too high for them as a first gift. Obviously, you're probably pinning it to a project, so it's probably related to project costs. So sort of in the trust fundraising way, it's got to meet reality. If your project only costs 25 grand for the year, you can't ask them for 50, right, and run it for 2 years. That would be enormous. But you could say, I can see that you're super interested in project X. Do you know that costs us £25,000 to run, and at the moment we've only got £10,000 of that secure this year? Would you consider covering the remainder of the costs? That's an ask. And no one is going to be too offended if you ask them for too much. They're going to be secretly flattered that you think they're more rich than they are. It's rare that people are offended by really big asks. I mean, obviously, don't go and ask people for £1 million. That's an insanity. But within the construct of they can afford 10 and you ask them for 15 or 20, no one's going to be upset. They're going to say, at the moment, I could afford to contribute 5 towards that. So you might end up with a lower number than you ask. No one's ever going to give you a higher number than you ask. So it's a roundabout way of answering a question there's no easy answer to that question, but there are some of the ways that you can approach that problem. Has anyone else got any questions? I've got one more that came to me before we started today, but otherwise, has anyone got any questions they want to ask me now? While you guys are typing, hopefully there's some typing of questions going on. I will go into the next question and just come to your questions in a minute, which is how do I start if I haven't got any time and I don't have any dedicated staff? Like, oh my God, this feels big and it feels too overwhelming. So you can't do it if you have literally zero time. You do need to be able to carve out some time. But say this is going to become part of a larger job, you need to have a realistic thought about how much you can carve out. So let's say you could dedicate half a day a week to major donor fundraising, right? Um, then I think you can have a major donor program, and that major donor program could extend to being 8 to 10 people. There is no rule that says a major donor program has to be multiple philanthropy fundraisers raising millions of pounds from hundreds of people. You could have a functioning major donor program with a handful of people, with a dozen people. What a major donor program is defined by is the approach you take to people and the size of the gifts you ask for, not the volume of those asks. So if you can genuinely give aside half a day a week, then I would say you pick 8 to 10 people, and that is how you allocate your time. You definitely don't do more than 10 in half a day a week. And I would say if you've never done it before, you probably start with 2 or 3 and you work your way up to having 10. That's like the reality of time, is you can give a tiny amount, but you have to be able to give some. And where do you start is, well, I mean, you have to have a compelling reason for someone to give, but you already knew that because you're already a fundraiser and you're already raising money in other ways through sharing compelling asks. And you just need to find one person. If you have a database, you can go through your database. If you don't have a database, you could go through like your local who's who. If you're a geographically located charity, hospices is always my favourite example. You can go through Kent Life or Surrey Life or whatever your local county life is. And the who's who of the county are always being photographed on the back pages at the events. And you can use your the lieutenancy office. The Lord Lieutenant of a county is the King's representative of that county, and they then have deputy lieutenants in most counties, and they tend to be the great and the good. In some counties, they're structured to actively support local charities. Your community foundation will have links to local philanthropists. You will be able to follow the local press and see who's who locally. You could start with local business owners. They will be wealthy people and work it out from there. So there are lots of different ways you can identify people. You certainly don't have to pay for research if you're a local and small charity. And then you just need to reach out to them. So going back to my previous answer, you've identified someone you think has an affinity to your cause through something you've found out about them. You want to approach them. You know they are a local successful business owner. They own multiple businesses locally. You literally reach out to them cold and go, "Dear Sandra, I work for this hospice locally. I'm sure you've heard of us. I am building a strategy to improve our fundraising because we have a £10 million a year funding gap. One of the things I want to do is reach out to successful business owners such as yourself to seek support. What I'd really love to ask of you is your advice on how I could do that." So you're not asking her for money. You're not saying you're not going to ask her for money. You're asking Sandra for her advice. Would you be able to spare 45 minutes of your time to help me understand your world, that kind of thing? So that's how I would start. So thanks for the questions. Kate of Student Minds has come in first. She has a question: how about to reach out to people who you don't have an existing connection with? How do we get their attention effectively to set up that first meeting? So Kate, I've covered one option in my previous answer, which is reach out to people if they've got a public face, like they're a local business owner, and ask their advice. Find out where they will be. That's the other thing. So do they belong to a networking group? So you might think that's corporate fundraising, but are they a member of the local chamber of commerce or a local less nationally known business forum, something like that? Do they belong to a club you could frequent without looking like a stalker? Is there a space where it would be congruent to do networking and you know they will be there? Or can you find someone who can connect you? That's the other way. So do you have a trustee who can, or other member of staff or volunteer, doesn't really matter who, or other donor, who you could say, "Could you please help me connect with Sandra? Because I know that Sandra's got an interest in our cause. Coming from me, it would be cold. Coming from you, it would be an open door. Please, can you help?" That's a really nice, specific way of doing network mapping with trustees and volunteers. They don't have to open their address books. They know this person. You're asking them for a specific connection. You can reassure them that the connection is in order to ask for advice and to open a conversation. You're not asking these people to ask them for money. So that kind of thing. So yeah, so can you find someone who can connect you, or can you find out where they are in a non-stalkery way and be at that networking event? Or is there somewhere public you could just go to them? Is there a public enough reason for you to believe in their congruence with the cause that you could just say, "Hey, I saw that article you did, or I saw that you ran the marathon for the hospice up the road. Actually, do you know we're your local hospice?" That kind of thing. Kate. Alice, I'm planning a virtual event for our major donors. It will be online and focus on our charity's finances, how we're working to make them more sustainable, the impact we have. Great. This will be the first event of any kind we've had for major donors in a few years. Great. I'm 3 months in the role, so have had contact with some, but not many. Prior to me starting, cultivation and stewardship had been very patchy. I will be inviting around 100 people and have been asked to set an RSVP target. What would you think would be an achievable target? So, Alice, I'm assuming these people are pretty cold then. I mean, 10% would be great, right? Having it's a weird thing. So it's an online event. So it's not like you have to book a room. It's not like you have to organize catering. All of the things that are important for an in-person event to understand what size RSVP list you think you'll have. So on the one hand, I would push back and go, why? Why do you want to know? It's the first one of its kind. We're dipping our toes. We've kind of got to suck it and see. That's the first thing I would say to someone in that situation. There's no logistical reason to want to know. Um, and also, I mean, 100 people is a lot. You kind of don't want 100 people there, in my opinion, even to an online event. If only 5 people RSVP'd, but they turned up and they were really actively engaged in how your charity is financing itself, then you have got 5 really hot leads for people who are going to be easy to convert into major donors, and furthermore, probably easy to convert into evangelists who will then open their networks and find more donors for you. And in my opinion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those people is going to be way more useful to you and your organization than 50 to 60 people who turn up. No offense to any of you with your cameras off, have your cameras off and have their cameras off and don't engage. So I would challenge that volume of RSVP or volume of attendance is the right measure. It should be engaged participation in the event. It should be the right measure. Because it's patchy and cold and you're only just in post and you don't know, really, this is just a, well, let's see how this lands. People might find that subject not interesting. People might be busy that day. People might not want to hear from your charity because they've had a bad experience. You don't know. I think the other thing I would add, Alice, which isn't your question, is the people who RSVP no are as useful to you to go back to as the people who RSVP yes. I ran some events at the beginning of this year for a client, and I think we had about a 10% attendance rate to invites. And in that list, we had another small percentage of people who took the time to say no, they couldn't come. And the vast majority of invitees didn't respond, even when repeatedly reminded to RSVP. And those who said no, I realised, were also engaged. So one person turned around and said, I can't come. And I did some digging into them. It turns out they couldn't come because the time of day was when they dropped their children at school, and they were really interested and they'd tried to get childcare that day and they couldn't. But they hadn't bothered to explain that to me. They just RSVP'd and said no. I was able to arrange a one-to-one meeting between them and a senior person at the charity, and that has now snowballed, and they are on track to have a conversation about a significant 5-figure gift this year, moving into larger gifts, family-run business that could become a corporate partnership, and all sorts of things. And prior to this event invitation, this person was a £10 a month direct debit donor who I happened to notice had a really nice postcode, and therefore invited them just in case, and it has really worked. I can't guarantee that all of your no's will work, Alice, but it's definitely also worth following up on those who take the effort to say, no, I can't attend, as much as the yeses. Um, Brilliant. I'm glad you're getting people to RSVP directly to you, Alice. I think it's really important to just begin to have that conversation and dialogue and what have you. Um, has anyone else got any more questions? Or just topics of major donor fundraising they want me to touch on in any way? Um, Where have we got? Here we go, Jackie. Hello. I'm about to start working on our major donor strategy. It will need to be implemented across 3 regional fundraising teams who currently manage individual relationships irrespective of level of giving. Okay. I am expecting there may be some resistance, a strategy that may include a major donor fundraiser. Ooh. Are there any tips that you can give on how to best communicate a new strategy? Gosh, Jackie. That's really interesting, isn't it? So to date, your regional fundraisers are holding all the relationships and probably doing a really good job. I think community fundraisers are great at people and great at relationships and great at that stuff. And then, yes, I can see the tension where you haven't, you bring in an expert who could be seen to be taking away some of their income generation from them. Um, I mean, communicating a new strategy is best done by involving people in the creation of the strategy. And I realize that that is really hard work and not always very practicable. Is there a way that you can get those regional fundraising teams together so that they can scope out the size of what might be carved out from them? Because hopefully it would be small. Um, I also think that where there's a flip between a person who sits in a community team and then moves to being managed by a major donor team, it's worth having some clear protocols and lines from the very beginning. And that is also something that could be done as a group. You could co-create what does this look like? How does this best work for you, community regional team? If you identify someone and you've worked with them for X amount of time, but then it becomes clear that they want to give a big strategic gift, so you hand them to major donors, what does that look like in terms of you handing some of your target over because you'd already decided that was going to be reached by that person? You can kind of take all of the objections that are going to come out and turn them into a protocol so that all of those problems are answered up front. So it's always, Jackie, about just winning hearts and minds, isn't it? So bringing people on the journey rather than telling them what the journey is at the end. And I think if they could assess the size of the potential carve out and they could be part of the process of working out the protocols, those would both be really helpful things. I would also say, can your strategy focus on new names rather than existing names as a really specific thing? um, Partly because it will minimize the upset to regional teams who've got existing relationships. But also, if you think about it from a donor point of view, say you've got Phil over there in Devon who does his golf day every day and his company gives X, and they always do a wine and wisdom night or whatever, and he's got a great relationship with his local fundraiser for your charity. Does he want to move to being managed by someone who is potentially central, potentially based in Bristol, not in Devon? All of those things you need to consider from a donor centric point of view as well. So, I don't know what your strategy is going to be, but is there thought to a major donor fundraiser having 2 roles in that? They could be focused on acquiring new names, so they could go to Phil and ask him to open his networks, but they can't ask him for money, right? But also being like an internal consultant. I saw that work on a much larger scale really well at the National Trust a few years ago. Someone shared a case study with me where their central major donor team acted like internal consultants. So, where the community team wanted advice on how to uplift someone to a bigger gift, rather than keeping people squished at small gifts because that's all the community team manages, they could call on this internal ready resource rather than having to have specific training or getting external resource in as well. So those are all options that hopefully are helpful, Jackie. Catherine says, we are having our first major donor event in October and have several people we want to invite. However, we only have space for 40. What if they all came? Equally, what if no one comes? Very tricky. Completely agree, Catherine. So, if you've only got space for 40 at your event, you need to start by working out what is your actual capacity for invitations, because you've got to carve out an amount for staff and trustees and speakers and whoever else. And you've got to be really strict that if you're there, it's because you've got a role, no jollies, no freebies. And then, depending on your event, is this a plus ones event? So, is this the kind of thing where people will come on their own, in which case you can invite 40 potential people to turn up? Or is this the kind of thing where they will want to bring a plus one, in which case you've just halved your invite list straight away anyway? So, those are the really important things to get clear. What I would recommend, and let's be honest, so July, August, September, October, you're 3 months out. So if you get cracking now, you should be fine. Start sending an invite now. So decide what your maximum capacity is. So say it is 40 invites you can send because you can host 40 people. I'm assuming this is an in-person event and therefore you cannot expand beyond that. Send 40 invites out this week and give it an RSVP date of 3 weeks' time from now. Then, when they've RSVP'd and however many say no, then go to your tier two. And in 3 weeks from now, invite the next 20 because you've got 20 gaps. Do that if you think this event is going to be popular. I mean, your question, Catherine, says, what if they all come, but equally, what if no one comes? It's really tricky. If no one RSVPs, yes, all event plans should have a last possible date. We can cancel this. In the event plan, you should have your dates worked back with when can you cancel your venue, when can you cancel your catering, and what does the minimum viable number of guests look like? That's the other thing. So although you've got capacity for 40, would it look good if 10 people came? And I would refer to the earlier question, Catherine, where someone said about their online event. If you just had 5 really engaged potential major donors turn up to your event, and let's say the venue wasn't ridiculously enormous and it didn't look silly, wouldn't that be great to have face-to-face opportunity with 5 really engaged people who've made the effort to come, rather than cancel it because you were only willing to have that conversation if there were 30 in the room? So that's how I would word it, or think about it, I mean. Kate, another question. Absolutely, there's time, Kate. I'm here till 1 o'clock. I'd be interested in knowing more about how developed your project plan needs to be when you pitch it to them. Will they be looking for a fully developed plan for delivery of activities goals, fully costed budget plan for sustainable investment? Kate, I'm going to say that really annoying major donor thing. The answer is it depends on the person. I think most donors expect us as organizations to have that stuff nailed. They expect us to have that expertise, and we should be presenting ourselves as having the expertise of knowing what the need is, knowing that this project answers that need, and this is the scalability that's realistic for your organization with this amount of money over that time to meet that need. So yes, I think it needs to be pretty developed. I mean, whether you need to go all guns blazing and take them the full project plan like you were doing a really detailed trust application, probably not, but you probably need to be ready to give them all of those details when they ask. So those are the kinds of things you need to have ready. The proposal might be verbally given. You might say, would you consider £15,000 towards this after school project to enable us to access young people who would otherwise have nothing else to do, and these are the statistics that prove that they are at risk of knife crime or whatever it is. And that could be the level of detail that they need for the ask, but their answer to that ask might be, well, I want to see more detail before I decide to invest my £15,000. Can you send me the full business plan? And so you need to be ready with it, even if you don't go armed with it up front. I hope that answers your question. Imogen, hello. If you had 5K to invest specifically in acquiring new major donors after a charity brand relaunch, where would you put it for the highest return? That's a great question. That's like that if you won the lottery, how would you spend it question, isn't it? I'm the dedicated major donor fundraiser. We've done wealth screening already, but we don't have any programs in the UK. Okay, Imogen, you give that a thought. I don't think there is a single answer to where you should invest 5k specifically to acquire new major donors after a charity rebrand. What you need to do is make sure that you've got all of your ducks in a row. So I am going to say that you should take our scorecard, Imogen, specifically, and you should answer those 20 questions and see where you score high and where you score low. And don't be generous to yourself, be realistic when you do it and get the report. And that 5k is probably best spent supporting you where you score low, where in addition to that, Imogen, you specifically don't feel confident you can work it out. So if you score low in the case for support, but you've got a great list and you've totally nailed the process of major donor fundraising because you're an experienced major donor fundraiser, you should probably spend 5k getting some help, or not necessarily all of your 5k, but you should spend some money getting some help, nailing what is your proposition that's going to work for these people. You've done your wealth screening, so you've got your prospect list. Is it prioritized? Do you have enough research on your top 10 people, your top 20 people? Have you got a pipeline that's come out of that wealth screening where you can name to your manager your top prospect, your top 10 prospects, the next 10 prospects? Have you got all of that detail? Have you done their capacity grading? Have you done their inclination gradings? Have you done their propensity gradings? So do you know, next to your wealth screening, what their potential gift level is, what their interest in your organization is, and connection to your organization is, and what their interest in your cause area is? So they're very different things. Have you done that work? Can you do that work either from a capacity or a skill point of view? If not, get someone to come in, even if you spend a percentage of that, getting someone to come in and mentor and coach you on how to do that. So someone could work alongside you to teach you that skill and help set that up. And then from there, you just need the time to start having those conversations. So some of your 5k might be best spent on travel costs, hiring nice meeting space. Are you a member of, I don't know where you're based, Imogen, but if you don't have any programs you can take them to in the UK, have you considered membership of the Conduit Club, for example, which is a private members club in central London? I'm certainly not on commission from them. I'm not even a member myself yet, but I'm considering it. And it's a membership club for philanthropists. They have a charity rate. It's still about 2k a year, so it's a considered spend. What it offers you is the opportunity to network with philanthropists and give you a nice space to meet people. Imogen, you've raised your hand. You're welcome to come off mute and join in if it's helpful.
Well, you've been doing a lot of talking, so I thought I would just give you a quick break. Thank you. That's really useful, really interesting. I thought you might say do the scorecard, and in fact, I've got it open ready to do because I've been meaning to do it, so it's a good reminder. We're very fortunate that we did put some investment behind some wealth screening tools called Altrata,
Yes.
who used to be WealthX and Relsci. They are expensive, but I have to say they've been incredible for identifying connections.
Amazing.
And also that affinity piece. The capacity thing I've always found is fairly easy to find out from desk research, relatively, but the affinity piece sometimes was a bit harder. So I've actually got a list of 40 prospects. So there's about half are from my existing lower level givers.
Yep.
I'm looking to increase, and then the rest are totally new. But I feel like I probably need to do individual scorecards for them on capacity and affinity because I need to put 40 is too many because I'm also looking after 25 accounts of my current major donors. So
Yes.
40 is too many. So I think I'm going to have to prioritize those.
So what I recommend is that you do capacity, inclination, and propensity, or however you want to word it. But as I said, and for the benefit of the group, what's their potential giving level? What's their connection to your cause? And what is their connection to your organization specifically? How close or how distant are they? So you score them high, medium, low, whatever it is you want to do. But create an actual score, put a number behind that. So you might have a capacity of A to G, but put a number behind that so that A has a higher score and G has a lower score. Put you might score your proximity to your organization 1 to 5, where 1 is very, very distant and 5 is very, very close. Then take all 3 of those and literally add them together for all of your 40 and rank them. The one who scores the top 10 or 20 that score the highest are a combination of those who can give you the most and those who are the best connected to you. And that is how I would recommend you prioritize them, Imogen.
And I think we've used a few different terms, especially for those who are new for major donors. Capacity, I look at things like, is their house worth over £1 million? What kind of job titles do they have? And then fortunately for some of this wealth screening, it actually gives you, worth, between 1 and 5 million, or worth 5 million to 10 million, those kind of things. So that's what I put in capacity. I sometimes use affinity, but how would you use inclination and propensity? How do you define those? Because they're different, right?
No, affinity is just different wording. So I think that inclination is around their connection to your exact organisation.
Okay.
One of the indicators I use for high or low inclination is if they are an existing person on your database. So in the example Imogen's given, she's got people who are giving at a low level that she's identified as potentially able to give at a higher level. Now, have those people opted in or opted out of any newsletters you might get? Because that would give you an indication of their inclination towards your organisation. Are they inclined to hear from you? Literally.
Just the fact that they give already.
Active giving would help, but active giving and then opting out it does happen. So I had a situation recently where I was given a list of donors in the last 12 months, but it turns out a load of them, and they all passed wealth screening, but then it turns out a load of them had just sponsored their mates to do the marathon and had opted out of all communication. So they would pass on the have you given over X in the last 12 months, but they failed on the are you then interested to hear about us? Do you see what I mean? I think if they're giving on a regular monthly basis, then that is automatically a high inclination. But if they're like a one-off donor or an ad hoc donor, and they get swept up in I want to see everyone who's given over X in the last 12 months, you then have to add other layers to kind of make sure that you're interrogating that data. So I would say that, so it's about active giving and it's about active interest in your cause. So I know there are charities who have newsletter lists where these people are not asked to give, but there are potential major donors on those lists, and that's when inclination would come from being actively opted into being in a newsletter as opposed to opting out from that. And the other thing, and it depends on your cause area, so it doesn't work for everyone, but in health charities, is there a personal connection to the cause is another one. So do you know from public record that there's a family member with the same illness or disability or something like that? That's another real inclination type thing. But that then also moves into propensity. So let's say they're not a donor, but you think that they could be interested in your cause area as opposed to your charity. You then measure things like, have they got a personal connection to the cause, or are they personally connected to someone? Can you make a route to them? So there are different sort of layers to it. There's no sort of, and it sort of depends on your charity and what you do as well as to whether those are relevant for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in international child protection, so pretty niche. So part of the Wealth X, the Altrata tools, helpfully you can see where they've made donations that aren't anonymous or haven't been kept anonymous, and you can sort it by cause area, which has been incredibly useful.
It is a super powerful tool that is really, really spenny, but if you can afford it, I think it's an amazing investment. You're really lucky.
But equally, I used to work in the heritage sector, and what you suggested earlier about looking at those annual reviews where donor names are that are similar to you, that's always really helpful. And the other thing that's helped me is that our individual giving team, who generate the bulk of our income, they invested in mosaic profiling.
Oh, wow.
And so I have been able to use that to identify what segment major donors are likely to sit in. Unsurprisingly, it's category A, lavish lifestyles. So I've been into that as a filter as well. So if anyone else on the call has had mosaic profiling done, I found that to be hugely helpful.
And there is a really cheap alternative to Mosaic that isn't quite as fancy as Mosaic, but Mosaic is broadly based on postcodes, right? So if you know people's postcodes, you can go to the Office for National Statistics and you can find out the average household income per postcode in this country. And you can download that as a massive spreadsheet, and then you rank it by highest average household income and the lowest average household income. And if you look at all the postcodes that have above average household income and you try and match them to any postcodes in your database, that's one way to identify potential major donors. And particularly if you start at the very top of that list, I wouldn't necessarily take people near the middle, but if you stop rank by high to low and you look at the top 20 postcodes and then you see, are any of those postcodes in my CRM? You can also do it by house value. The Office for National Statistics also has national house sales price values. So what are the house prices? And again, you can sort that by postcode nationally, and you can rank it so you can see what are the postcodes with the largest sales tickets on their addresses. Now obviously that is about size of house, and it will be very southeast England skewed, where house prices are more expensive, and London skewed. But that doesn't matter, because if you're a national charity, that's still useful to know that people with a house sale over 5 million live in this postcode. And you also can do it as above average in different regions. So if you are a regional northeast charity, you could filter out all the postcodes that aren't relevant for the northeast of England, and then you still then sort them high to low, and you've still got the most wealthy postcodes by house price sale for your region. And you can do that again for median income as well across there. So there are two opportunities there for organizations that can't afford Mosaic profiling. It's a bit more rough and ready, and Mosaic is lovely, and our charter is lovely, and Railsci is lovely. But for those who can't afford it, there are kind of options that just cost you a bit more in terms of time.
Yeah, I have been very lucky to have some tools with some budget behind. That has been really nice.
Yeah.
But to go back to my question, I mean, I don't actually have a £5,000 budget for this piece, but I figure, you don't ask, you don't get. So
Yeah.
the Conduit Club, I've never heard of, and that is so exciting because I don't have any UK programs. I don't have our offices in Cambridge, but most of my donors are in London. So actually, maybe I could encourage them to spend a bit of money, become members there, and that could be the meeting spot. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's their membership is open at the moment. I'm actually going on a tour myself next week. It's not always open. So
Okay.
I would suggest that if that's even potential, or you want to build the business case for it, see if you can go and book a tour while they're open, because then they've said that if you decide to apply for membership, they'll take your application, and you can talk to them about who the other charities are that are members. And they've got an app with all their members on it. So there's a strict no sales policy, which I imagine extends to charities not doing pitches to donors, right? But they also host philanthropy events, and a lot of that does, from their website, look to be international development Imogen. They've had Malala speak and things like that, Malala Yousafzai. So they have really interesting events. And then, of course, going back to one of the things I said at the very beginning about where do you start, one of the things you can do when you very much start trying to find people who are interested in your cause is go to networking events where they are. And if the Conduit is the kind of place that's hosting these events anyway, brilliant. You're already there. You're already a guest. You can't get in any other way. It's not like you can pay to join those events. They are for members only. So the Conduit is definitely one I would consider for
Mhm.
some of your spend if you've got the budget for it. But otherwise, I would say just look at where you're weakest and where you want the best support, and see if you could pitch for a bit of support there. Because it sounds like you've got all the pipeline you're ever going to need, and it sounds like you've got a really good methodology for prioritizing that pipeline. And then it's just about focusing on who those top 40, 60 people are, and getting in front of them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And just from an events point of view, I mean, I've been going to philanthropy impact events, which
Yeah.
are great. I mean, again, it does cost to be a member, but they're great. And often I've met some really interesting people, but I must admit that they're mostly philanthropist intermediaries that you meet,
Yeah.
not philanthropists themselves. And of course, so many wealth managers But of course, if they work for banks, generally they can't recommend your charity anyway. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not in London. If I was in London, I, try and go to more of these things, but I'm not. So, you've got to sort of focus your energies and your resources, haven't you? But
Yeah, you do. The conduit has an out of town offer. If you're not based in London, it's cheaper. But they also have a charity discount, and I'm not sure if they do a charity out of town offer that would make it even cheaper, but I would definitely ask them.
I will have a look. Thank you. You should be on commission for them.
Well, I haven't even been in there yet, so maybe this is totally overselling it. Someone sold it to me recently, so like I say, I'm going to see it next week and get a sense of the place, and I might do a blog on it because I think it's a really interesting idea.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, I shall go back on mute for any of the questions, but thanks, Beth. Super helpful.
No, you're really welcome, Imogen. We have got roughly another 15 minutes. So if anyone does have any more questions, either jump in as Imogen has done or type your message below. And I'm really happy to answer questions, or just, if you want me to talk about any kind of key aspect of major donor fundraising, I'm very happy to do that. Just checking I've answered all the questions. I think I have. Wow, everyone's gone very quiet. So I've got a question. I don't know if you saw my colleague Hannah's blog this week. She wrote a blog about how the summer is kind of, time off for donors, but it's a great moment for strategy for us as major donor fundraisers. Has anyone got any summer plans with their major donor fundraising that they want to share that they think is quite interesting? Have they got any if anyone's got any traction with donors over the summer, I think we'd all love to hear that secret. But has anyone got anything they're doing particularly with their major donor fundraising as we head into school holidays, or is everyone just like, phew, thank goodness it'll be a bit quieter and I can rest easy? Oh, wow. So Imogen's doing a massive brand relaunch in the autumn. So it's going to be a really busy summer. I hear you there. Oh, Sophie's saying that she has been to the Conduit and went to an event there. And it's a really wonderful location and a wonderful team. So thanks, Sophie. Really great to have something that's a bit more knowledgeable than me, who's just seen their website and thinks it looks nice. So thank you very much. Is anyone here a member of the Conduit? You don't have to admit if you don't want to. But I know there are some of the big charities are members, because there's a couple of big charity fundraisers have recommended to me that it could be a useful place for more major donor fundraisers to go. But I think it's like 2.5 grand a year. So it's definitely a considered spend. I used to be a member at House of St Barnabas, which was a charity private members club, but unfortunately that didn't survive the pandemic. If none of you guys have got any more questions, and still, put your hands up if you're typing or you've got any more questions, then I'm gonna say goodbye. One last thing I want to point out to you guys is we have just launched our events program through to Christmas, ready for the autumn. We're not doing any more events after this one until September. So we take August off our live chats and we don't do any webinars over that time. But we have just launched all of our dates, both these free live chat dates and our paid for webinars through to Christmas. So the first event, and it's actually Hannah is hosting it, the webinar is called the 3 C's of Major Donor Fundraising, which is all about focused, actionable plans and really being tangible with those major donors and treating them as individuals. So what is your next step and how are you going to connect with them and how do you do any of that stuff? So if you've got a small amount of budget to pay for training, I definitely recommend these online webinars. You can attend them live and get the benefit of the Q&A, so Hannah can really help embed that knowledge into your specific situation. But even if you can't join her live, you get a recording afterwards on a YouTube link, so you can watch it back at your leisure whenever you want. As I say, we've also got our live chats booked from September through to December as well. So if you want to come back in the autumn and have more of these chats, meet more of your colleagues, learn a bit more about major donor fundraising, pick Hannah's brains about major donor fundraising, capital appeals, how major donor fundraising works well with corporates. That's another great one of Hannah's skills. Then please do go in. Although the sessions are free, as you know, just register for your ticket. We've got our trust fundraising lives also on there. I can see Kate said that you're trying to differentiate between the strategy required for trust and the strategy required for major donors, but we also do our trust Q&A. So if your role does overlap, we've got those there as well. And otherwise, we're here for you as much as you need us, and we want to support you all to make brilliant major donor programs, so that when you come back in a few months' time, instead of all scoring 4 out of 10 on your confidence in your major donor program, we'd love to see you all scoring 7, 8, 9 and 10. So